to the mikvah will be okay. Okay, we have Gimel.
And before you read base Gimel, I want you just to remember the positions of Rabbi Eliezer. Dalet. When we get to Dalet, you need to remember the position of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. But let's go.
Okay, these are the cases of doubt pertaining to drawing water with the sages that declared to tahor. There's doubt whether it fell into the mikvah or it did not fall. Or alternatively, if it definitely did fall, there is doubt whether there was 40 saw in the mikvah or whether there was not. Or alternatively, there were two mikvahs, one containing 40, the other not, and it fell into one of them, but it does not know which one it fell. These doubtful cases are adjudged tahor because there is something on which it depends. But if they each contain less than 40 saw and fell into one of them, and he does not know which one it fell, this doubtful case is adjudged tameh because there is nothing to depend on. Reb Eliezer says one revius of drawn water that qualifies a mikvah at the beginning, but 3 lugim when it's on the surface of the water. But the Kachamim say both at the beginning, at the end, the amount is 3 lugim. If a mikvah has 3 hollows, each containing 1 log of drawn water, when it is known that 40 saw invalid water had already fallen into the mikvah before they reach the 3rd hollow, it is valid. Otherwise, it is invalid. But Reb Shimon declares it valid because it's like one mikvah next to the other.
Okay.
That's a kiddush, though. That's
a
kiddush. That's a kiddush, one mikvah next to the other. They're 2 different mikvahs.
Well, so what we're saying is that the walls of the mikvah are rough. Okay, and they're little, you have little pockets inside the walls, and there was some drawn water inside 3 separate pockets. Each one was a log. Okay. Now you start filling up the mikveh with natural rainwater, and it comes up and hits the first one, hits the second one, hits the third one. Now before it reaches the 40 sa'ah. So the question that's being discussed over here is: do these 3 combine to make 3 logim at the beginning, 3 logim to disqualify the mikveh, or are they considered as if a mikveh, like a mikveh next to a mikveh? In other words, that the water in the first one immediately became tahor from the rainwater that came in before. Okay. So Rabbi Shimon is the only one who says that it comes out okay. Everyone else says that's 3 logim of drawn water in there, and your mikveh's pasul. Okay. Let's start in. So here's our situation: is we've got the mikveh is busy filling up with rainwater, but it's also washing a lot of mud into the mikveh. And the guy looks at this and says, "Look, I'm not sure that there's actually going to be like 40 sa'ah of space for water in here with all this mud that's coming in." So he gets his hand inside there and he starts scraping the mud up the sides of the mikveh to make more space for water. Okay. So, but as he does that, the mud obviously is saturated with water, and that water is going to start dripping back down into the mikveh. Now, if there's 3 logim of that water in there, now the question is: did you just put 3 logim of drawn water into the beginning of the mikveh before it had 40 sa'ah? Okay. So mashchum mimenu shlosh logim kasher. This is considered kasher. Why? Because it's not actually drawn water. He didn't lift up the mud. All he did was he scraped it to the side. So that's not considered drawn water. Hayatolesh, however, if he picked it up with his hands, if he actually got his hands in, picked up the mud and slapped it on the side, and then it started dripping back down. Mashchum mimenu shlosh logim. That's pasul. There he really did pick up the water in his hand. And that is now drawn water if it falls back into the mikveh. Okay, Rabbi Shimon Machshir, Rabbi Shimon says this is not considered drawn water. Why? Because his intention was to remove the mud. He had no intention to pick up the water. And since he had no intention to pick up the water, that's not considered drawn water. But again, the halacha doesn't follow Rabbi Shimon in this case. Okay. All right. Zayin. Ha'meniach kan kanim berosh hagag. If he left a bunch of vessels on the top of his roof in order to dry them out, he just wanted them to dry it in the rain. And what happened? Oops! The rainstorm came, and now they became filled with water. Now, as it happens, there's a path from his roof down to his new mikveh, which is, if the water had to spill out of these jugs, it would hit the drainage and fall down and go into his mikveh. So now he wants to know, well, I mean, I've nearly got a full mikveh over here. can I just knock these vessels over, let the water flow out, and contribute to my mikveh? Rabbi Eliezer Omer, im onas geshamim hi. He says it depends if it's winter or summer. If it's rain time, okay, then this is if it's winter time, then what can he do? Im yesh bo kimat mayim babor. First of all, there must be a little bit of water first in the bore, because remember, Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that a mikveh is possible with, if we look at Mishna Dalet, that's why I asked you to remember that one. He said that if the mikveh has got no water in it at first, then even a revius of water is it will passel it, as opposed to 3 log. Okay, and a revius, remember that's what you've got in your cup of wine for kiddush.
Right.
Okay, so it says if there's a little bit of water at least in the mikveh, yishaber, then fine, break the kalim so that you're not actually directly moving the water, and it doesn't become mayim she'uvin, and then it can flow down into the mikveh. Im lav, however, if it's not,
you can't pick up the jar and pour it in. You can't pick up the jar and pour it in. You got to break it.
No, definitely not. Everyone would agree. If you pick as soon as you pick up the jar, that's going to be mayim she'uvin. So he's saying if you want this for the water, then break your kalim and let the water flow in. However, if it's summertime, okay, and there's no water, and therefore there's no water in the bore, lo yishaber. You can't break it. Okay. Rabbi Yeshua ben kach or ben kach, he says, I don't care what season it is. First of all, that's because he doesn't care, because the consensus opinion of the Chachamim is that it doesn't matter whether it's the beginning or the middle of your first 40 sa'ah. It's 3 log is your minimum measure is the measure of mayim she'uvin to passel a mikveh. So ben kach yishaber. You can break it, or you don't even have to break it. Knock it over. Just kick the kalim over and let them spill over naturally. That's not considered mayim she'uvin as long as you don't pick them up. Aval lo yareh, if you can't pick them up and pour them, that will turn it into mayim she'uvin. Okay. Mishna ches. Hasayad sheshachach atitz babor. Okay, so the guy was busy plastering the bore with sid, right? With plaster. He was making a nice mikveh, that's going to hold the water in and not leak the water out. And of course, he's got a bucket that he's been using for his plaster, and he was plastering nicely, and then he finished his job for the day and climbed out the bore, and the next thing it rained, and lots of rainwater flowed into the mikveh, and his bucket was still inside the mikveh. Okay, so now what does he do with this bucket of water that's inside the mikveh? Im hayu hamayim tzapim al gabav kol shehu. So fine, if the water level was above his bucket, then he is allowed to break the bucket and let the water seep, join the rest of the mikveh.
Water in that pot, the water in his pot is above.
Yes.
Okay.
So if the water is floating above the pot, any amount, so then the water that's inside the pot is already joined to the water that's in the bore. So you can break the pot, and that counts for the mikveh. But if not, if the water is below the level of the pot, he cannot break the pot, because the water is considered she'uvim. Okay. And if that pot has got 33 log inside it, then that will passel the mikveh. Thus says Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, so the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer is he says that this is different from the kankanim that were on the roof in the previous Mishnah, because according to Rabbi Eliezer, in the case of the kankanim on the roof, if there's a little water in the bore, then you can break it, because the rainwater that will flow down into them was not the rainwater that fell into the things on the roof was not what he wanted. He put it up there to dry. Okay, so therefore the water that fell into it is not considered mayim she'uvin. So okay, but here, even though there's water in the bore, he's not allowed to break it because the water that's in the atzit is a little bit to his ratzon, because because this is he wanted to fill up the place with water. It's in the place where he wanted the water, but now it's in a bucket. Okay, and so therefore Rabbi Eliezer says that that bucket is basically mayim she'uvin, and you cannot even break it without moving it. You got to take the whole bucket out and leave the water alone. Okay. Rabbi Yeshua,
why I'm having a problem with this. There's water in the bore. There is water in the bore already, right? Not enough for a mikvah.
Even though there's water in the bore, yeah.
He's standing in this water working on plastering the mikvah. He has his pot there, and he gets the pot. And meanwhile, the pot fills with water for some reason.
So this is overnight. He forgot the pot in the thing overnight, and he walked away, and now suddenly it's all full of water. That's okay. Okay. So he wasn't standing in the water.
All right. Okay, I got it. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Okay. Now Rabbi Yeshua comes and says, Ben kach or ben kach, yeshaver. It doesn't matter. You can break it because it's because he does not see this. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the water level is above the bucket, if it's below the bucket. Forget about it, because this is all it's not considered mayim she'uvim in the least. It fell into the bucket, but it's still in its natural state. And therefore he can just break the bucket. Even if the water is but even if the water was above it, the water is not, even if the water level is below, it's not considered she'uvim. Even Rabbi Yeshua though is machmir, because when we were talking about the things on the vessels on the roof, he said you could knock it over. Here he doesn't say you can knock it over. Here he just says you have to break it. Okay, because there is a little bit of tfisas yedei adam. Because he agrees with Rabbi Eliezer to the extent that here this is much more leratzon, that the water fell into the bucket, because it's in the place where you want the water to fall. Okay, and therefore putting your hands on it and tilting it is going to be a little bit more like mayim she'uvin, and therefore he says break the bucket. And don't tilt it. Okay, and that's us, our new Mishnahs for the day. Let's go. Toros Tes Zion.
If he wanted to take from them enough for one press or for two presses, Ben Shammai says he may cut in Tuma but must cover in Tahara. Basila says he may even cover in Tuma. Rabbi Yoshi says he may dig with metal spades and bring to the pressing house in Tuma. If a dead sheretz is found in the mill, only the place where it touches tummy. If there was liquid floating, everything is tummy. If the dead sheretz was found on top of the leaves, they should ask the pressers if they can say, we did not touch. If the dead sheretz was touching the compound mass, even by a hair, it is tummy. If the dead sheretz was found on top of chunks and it is touching the volume of an egg, it is tummy. If there were chunks on top of chunks, then even if it is touching the volume of an egg, only the place where it touches tummy. If it was found between the wall and the olives, they are tahor. If it was found on the roof, the olives and the holders are tahor. If it was found in the holder, the olives on the roof are tameh. If it was found burnt on the olives, and similarly in the case of a single garment, it is tahor. All cases concerning tumah follow the time in which they were found.
Okay. Hara.
Yeah. Yud base Gimel. One intended to sprinkle on something that could contact tumah, and sprinkled on something that cannot contact tumah. If there is water on hyssop, he needed not repeat. If on something that cannot contact tumah, and he sprinkled on something that cannot contact tumah, even if there is water on the hyssop, he must repeat. One on a person, he sprinkled on an animal. If there is water on the hyssop, he need not repeat. On an animal, and he sprinkled on a person. If there is water on hyssop, he must repeat. Water that drips is valid and therefore contaminates as katas water. If one sprinkles from a public window and he entered the temple and the water was found to be invalid, he is exempt. From a private window and he enters the temple and the water was found to be invalid, he is liable. But the Kohen Gadol, on whether from private window or from public window, is exempt, since the Kohen Gadol is not liable for temple entry. But they would slip in front of the public window and would tread there without restraint, since they said katas water which has performed its task does not contaminate. The tahor person holds a tummy hatchet with his garment, and one sprinkles it on it, even though it has on it sufficient water for sprinkling, he is tahor. How much water is enough for sprinkling? Enough to dip the tips of the stalks and sprinkle. Rabbi Yehuda says, we view the water as if it is upon hyssop of copper.
Okay.
Okay.
Ohalos.
Okay, Tet Vav, Tet Zion. Yeah. If a barrel is outdoors resting on its bottom and an olive-sized piece of corpse is underneath or inside the barrel of its bottom, on its bottom, tumor penetrates upward and downward and the barrel becomes tummy. If the tumor is outside the barrel but underneath its sides, tumor penetrates upward and downward and the barrel remains tahu. When the tumor is inside the barrel under its side, if there is a cubed handbreadth inside the sides of the barrel, everything becomes tummy except what lies directly below its mouth remains tahu. However, if there is less than a cubed handbreadth, tumor penetrates upward and downward. In what case does this apply? When the barrel is tahu. But if it's tame, one handbreadth above ground, covered and sprinkled upside down, there is tumor below, inside, or above the barrel, and everything becomes tame. Next. Olive. Yud Olive. If there is a skylight that is the size of a square handbreadth in a house, and then there is tumor in the house, whatever directly opposite the skylight remains tahu. If tumor is directly opposite the skylight, the house remains tahu. Whether the tumor is in the house or directly opposite the skylight, a person who places his foot above the skylight combines tumor. If part of the tumor is in the house and part of the opposite the skylight, the house remains tummy, and whatever directly opposite the tumor becomes tummy. If the skylight is smaller than a square handbreadth and there is tumor in the house, whatever directly opposite the skylight remains tahor, and if the tumor is directly opposite the skylight, the house remains tahor. If the tumor is in the house and a person places his foot above the skylight, the person remains tahor. If the tumor is opposite the skylight and a person places his foot above the skylight, remains declares him tummy. However, the comments say, if the tumor preceded the foot, the person becomes tummy, and if the foot preceded his tumor, he remains tahor. Reb Shimon says, if 2 feet, one above the other, precede the tumor, and then the first person removes his foot, while the second person's foot remains in place, the second person remains tahor because the first one's foot precedes the tumor.
Okay. I'm running out of time. Let's see if we can do one more.
We are?
Brilliant, yeah.
Okay. What is valid for the red cow is invalid for the decapitated heifer, and what is valid for the decapitated heifer is invalid for the red cow. What is fit for Kohanim is unfit for the Levites. What is fit for Levites is unfit for Kohanim. What is tar in earthenware utensils is tame in oily utensils. What is tar in oily utensils is tame on earthenware utensils. What is tar in wooden utensils is tame in metal utensils. What is tar in metal utensils is tame in wooden utensils. What is the subject of tithing? And bitter almonds is exempt to sweet ones. What is subject to tithing and sweet ones is exempt from bitter ones. Tamid, as long as it's not fermented, Temed, as long as it is not fermented, it may not be purchased with tithe money and renders the mikvah unfit. After it is fermented, it may be purchased with tithe money, and it does not render a mikvah unfit. Rather, brothers who are partners, when they are obligated to pay a korban, they are exempt from the animal tithe. But when they are obligated to give the animal tithe, they are exempt from the korban. Whenever there is a right of sale, there is no fine imposed, and whenever there is a fine imposed, there is no right of sale. Wherever there is a refusal, there is no kalitza, and wherever there is a kalitza, there is no refusal. Wherever there is a horn blast, there is no havdalah, and wherever there is havdalah, there is no horn blast. When the festival falls on the eve of the Sabbath, the horn is sounded and no havdalah recited on the departure of the Sabbath. Havdalah is recited and the horn is not sounded. How do we recite havdalah? Who distinguishes between holy and holy? And Dossi says between greater holiness and lesser holiness. One more. If one slaughters by cutting one of the organs of a bird or both organs of an animal, the slaughtering is valid, and the greatest part of the organ is tantamount to its entirety. Rabbi Yehuda says until he severs the virgin. If he severs half of one organ of a bird or one half of an organ of an animal, his slaughtering is valid. And if he severs the greater part of one organ of a bird or the greater part of both organs of an animal, his slaughtering is valid.
Okay. Adkan, I'm going to have to pull out and go to Shachris now. So
Okay,
I'll
have a
do
great
the
day.
rest.
Enjoy.
You too. Good day. B'sar Tzavat.